Hello and welcome to the fourth video of this ultimate video guide on how to create a patient portal application using Caspio's low-code platform. In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build all the forms, reports, and charts using Caspio's visual application builder. Let's have a look. If you followed along each of the videos, you now know how to build all the tables. You also know how to relate all the tables using primary and foreign keys. We also learned how to set up two views to filter out active patients and active doctors. And finally, we learned how to set up our two authentications. Now what we're going to learn is how to set up all the forms, all the reports, and charts that make up this application. And to do that, what you need to do is go into the Data Pages object. Data pages are application interfaces that eventually embed into your own website. It's what your end users are going to be interacting with. So if you think of an application, a single application can be comprised of multiple data pages, and each data page is an individual component of that application. And to set up a new data page, all you need to do is click on this link, New Data Page, and that's going to launch Caspio's point-and-click data page wizard. But before we do that, let's first create three different folders. Folders are a great way to organize your data pages because if you don't use the folders, you're going to end up with a long list of data pages and becomes really difficult to find the one that you need to edit. So the best way to use the folders is for every user group that your application has, you want to create a folder for it. So we know that our application is going to have doctors, and we also know we're going to have patients. And eventually, when you build these data pages, you're going to be moving these data pages into their respective folders. This application is also going to have a public submission form to allow patients to self-register. So I'm also going to create one more folder for any of the public data pages that I'll have. So if you think about it this way, this folder is going to contain all the password-protected data pages for doctors. This one will contain all the password-protected data pages for patients. And this one is going to contain all of the public-facing data pages that don't require a login interface. So the first thing that I'm going to build is a very simple registration form to allow patients to self-register. So I will open up this folder, click on the new data page link, and if you look here on the left-hand side, these are all the different types of data pages that you can create. You can build input forms to submit data into your tables. You can build reports to output data from your tables. You can build calendars. Calendars are great applications to create because if you're building, let's say, an appointment tracking application or event management, it would be nice to be able to display all of those events onto a calendar. You can also build charts. Charts are an excellent way to display data to understand what your data is telling you. So if you need to build KPIs or see metrics, you can visually represent your data by using a chart. And finally, if you're a little bit more technically adept, if you know how to code in HTML, you can build more robust and sophisticated applications using this data page type. But as I just mentioned a minute ago, I'm going to be building a submission form to allow patients to self-register. So you select this data page type, you click Next, and then using the data source dropdown, this is now where you select the table that you would like to feed that data into. And if we're allowing patients to do a self-registration, ideally we want that data to be stored inside the patient info table. So that needs to become my data source. For your data page name, you're going to call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call this patient registration form, something very simple. When it comes to selecting a style, your account is going to come with some preloaded styles. Styles are all about aesthetics, the look and feel of your form. So if you want to have a different color of your label or a different color of your field, maybe change some padding, you're going to select a specific style here, or you can go to the styles object at a later time and fully configure your own style to match the look and feel of your brand. So whatever color palette you have on your website, you can go to this object and you can fully modify each one of the components. For this specific video guide, I have a unique style that I created offline, and I'm going to be using a style called Caspio Bootstrap. Under localization, localizations are all about regional settings. So if you want to change the language of your form or even the date format, you can apply a specific localization from this dropdown. I'm going to be using this demo English, my default one. And for access and security, we're not going to enable this on this form because the registration form is public facing, meaning whoever goes to my website, I would like for them to be able to self-register. So there's no need to apply a login screen on top of the registration form. So at this point, we're going to hit next. And now Caspio is asking us, what fields do you wish to use in this web form? You can move one field at a time, or you can move all the fields to the right. And that's what we're going to do. Hit next one more time. At this point, when you reach a screen called Configure its Properties, here you can select all the fields on the left-hand side, and you can make modifications on the right side. If you want to see what the form looks like at this point, you can always click on the Preview button, and then Caspio is going to give you a preview of what your form looks like. I'm going to make a few modifications on this submission form to show you how easily you can modify fields, create multiple columns, some radio buttons. So let's close the Preview tab. And then all I want to do on this submission form is create the form to have 2 columns, and I want to position the labels on top of my fields. And if you just do a simple modification like this and hit preview again, now you get to see what the form looks like. For family medical history and this field habitual consumption, I would like to create this to be a list box. So that's also a very simple change in Caspio. For family medical history, instead of that being a multi-select dropdown, I would like to have a multi-select list box. And I'm going to apply the same change to my habitual consumptions. How often do you exercise? I'm going to change this into a text area. And also for medication taken. Let's hit preview again. And very quickly you can see how easy it is to modify some of these field elements. For date registered, I would like for this to become a timestamp. I don't want the patients to be able to select a date on when they registered. So go back to Caspio, select the date registered field, and in this dropdown, you're going to find something called timestamp. Hit preview again, and you will see how we no longer see that field. It's now a hidden field, but behind the scenes, when you submit the form, it's automatically going to stamp the date and time of that submission. For my gender field, I would like to turn this into a very simple radio button because I want to be able to collect uniform data inside a database. I don't want somebody to make a spelling mistake. So ideally, what we want to do is provide some kind of a static selection here. So back inside Caspio, under gender, we're going to select, instead of text field, Caspio gives you the option for radio buttons. And all you have to do is type out male, click on the new button, and just type out female. Now when you hit preview again, you will see how we were able to quickly change that from a text field into a radio button. You'll find this account status checkbox at the very bottom. I don't want the patients to be able to check this themselves. What I would like to do by default is hide this field and enable their account right away upon submission so they can log into their portal without having somebody approve their account. So back inside the wizard, select the account status checkbox. And instead of that being form element checkbox, you can hide this field, and by default, you can have that be checked. So now when you hit preview, every time a patient registers, inside a table, they're going to be flagged as checked. You can also make any of the fields required if you wish. So if you go back to Caspio and you select the name field, there's a very simple checkbox here to make that field required. You can also apply that across all of your other fields. So if you want to require the phone number field, you can do the same thing. Age, gender, and just go down the list of all the fields that you wish to require. And lastly, simply just go through each of the fields and verify that you have the right form element applied. For example, under patient status, what I'd like to do, instead of that being a text field, by default, every time a patient signs up on my website, I want them to be flagged as a new patient. So all you need to do here is go ahead and hide this field, and default value, let's go ahead and assign new. So next time a doctor looks at the list of patients, he or she is able to see all the new patients, and now I can change the status to something else if needed. So if I hit preview from here, you will see that we no longer see that field. It's now hidden, but in the background, every time a new patient signs up, in the database, it'll be stored as new. I would also like the patients to be able to confirm their email. So let's go back inside Caspio, select the email field, and very simply just say repeat for confirmation. And for my label, it can read confirm email. Hit preview one more time. And now you get to see email and also email confirmation, along with password and confirming the password as well. The last thing that I would like to enable on my form is just to have a very simple heading of what that form is about. So let's go back to Caspio, and scroll to the top, and you'll be able to use this insert button to add what we call header and footer. And inside the header section, inside this window, all I'm going to do is type out some very simple text, new patient registration. From here, all you need to do is highlight that text and just change the format to any one of the sizes. It just depends on your preference. I'm going to go with heading 3, hit preview one last time, and that's what my form looks like. If you're happy with the design, go back to Caspio and very simply click on Finish to save your changes. And now you're going to have your very first data page created. From here, you can edit the form once again if you need to make additional changes. You can preview the form, but if you're ready to put this form on your website, all you need to do is click on the deploy link, enable deployment status, and then Caspio gives you 6 different deployment methods. The most popular one is the embed model. All you need to do is copy this snippet of code, paste that code into your website, publish your web page, and you will see this form seamlessly embed into your website. We're not going to do that in this video. As I said, that's going to happen in video 5. In this video, we're going to continue building the rest of our data pages for all the functionality. But if you attend the last video, you will see how I take each one of these data pages and deploy them into my website. So now let's go ahead and continue building the remainder of the data pages. And what we're going to do from here on out, we're going to speed things up a little bit. But at any point, if you get stuck, just go ahead and pause the video and go back if you need to. Let's continue by building the rest of the patient data pages first, and then we're going to move into the doctor data pages. For now, go ahead and close the public folder, open up the patients folder, and then click on the new data page to launch the wizard again. So what functionality did we want to create for the patients? We want them to be able to view their messages, view any of their prior visits, and be able to update their profile. So let's begin by building the updated profile page. For that, you're going to need a data page called single record update. So select that and continue. Under data source, if you guessed the patient info table, you are correct. All the patient information resides inside that table. So if I'm going to pull my information from that table as the patient, that needs to become my data source. I'm going to call this data page update profile. I'm going to use the same style as before. And this time I want to enable this checkbox to apply access and security, because in order for the patient to view their profile, they have to log into the application first. So in this dropdown, select your authentication called patient login. Both of these objects are coming from here. These are the authentications that we created in video number 3. So let's continue. So now we need to identify the record. And how do we do that? We do that using RLS, or record level security. So if you're logging as the patient, it's going to verify your patient ID. And inside that patient table, we also have patient ID. So let's continue. Now it's asking, what fields do you want to have in your web form? In other words, what information do you want the patient to be able to update? So these fields are completely up to you. Whatever fields you find important that you want your patients to be able to update in their profile, you can allow them to do that. So I'm just going to include a couple of fields. Of course, you can include as many as you want. I'm also going to have email and password, so that at any time they can update their email and password if they choose to do so. Let's continue. Now what you need to do is change the form element. So if you don't want the patient to be able to update their name, you can leave it as display only. But if you want them to be able to update their name at any point, you can change that to a text field. So just go down the list of all of your other fields and apply the changes that you want. For gender, we also had male or female. Maybe for this one, we leave it as display only. Insurance carrier, let's have them be able to update that. Email, they can update. And password, they should be able to update. Once you're done making all of your changes, at this point you can hit the preview button again, and you will now see that login screen. So now the patient has to log in before they can view that profile. And we happen to have one inside a database, that's John Doe. So if we sign in as John at patient.com and we input the password of test, now you can see how John can log in and be able to complete his profile. If you like the way the profile page looks, you can close the preview, hit finish once again to save your changes, and there is your very first data page for your patients. Let's build 2 more data pages very quickly, because we want them to be able to see their prior messages and also prior visits. Let's begin with the visits first. So new data page. And this time we're not inputting or updating any information from the table. This time I would like to be able to view the information from the table. So we go to reports, let's go into tabular format, and if you look at the illustration below, this is essentially what you're creating. The ability to search if you decide to have a search interface, the ability to view the results, and drill into details. So let's continue. If I want to look at the information from the visits table, I need to select that to be my data source because that's where we're storing all of the vital signs and any of the other important textual information. Let's give this a name. We're going to call this very simple, prior visits. I'm going to use the same style. And once again, I need to enable this checkbox. Select my patient login because I have to log in first before I can view my own visits. Hit next. Now, do you want the patients to be able to search information using a search interface? Or do you just want them to be able to see a list of all the prior visits? I think just seeing the list should suffice, so I'm going to select the second radio button. I also need to enable record level security because when I log in as the patient, I only want to be able to see visits that pertain to my unique ID. So patient ID in the authentication and also patient ID from the visits table. Hit next. I'm not going to filter based on any data from that table. Let's just continue. And now, what information do you want to display in the results page? So useful information in the results page, we can have date of visit, reason. We'll include all the other information. Doctor notes is really just for internal notes, so we don't really have to include that in the results page. But we can display the doctor ID so that we can see who was the doctor that checked us in or that gave us treatment. Now it's going to display the doctor ID initially, but later on I'm going to show you how in the relationship screen you can substitute the ID with the actual name of the doctor. So let's continue. On this screen, do you want the patients to be able to edit any of the results? We're going to leave this unchecked because we only want them to be able to read the data. We don't want them to be able to edit any of the information. Let's continue. So really the only change that I want to apply here is I would like to do some calculations here. So I'm going to insert what we call totals and aggregation, which you'll see at the very bottom. And the totals that I want to get is for weight, temperature, pulse, systolic and diastolic reading. And the function that I want to apply for those calculations is going to be average. So over time, I would like to be able to see average numbers of all of my visits. Let's continue. I'm not going to make any changes on this screen. This allows you to specify how many records you want to display per page. You can also sort your data. So just play around with some of these options so you can see how it affects the results page. Let's continue. And now the wizard is basically asking me, do I want to have a details page? If I'm already showing enough information on the results page and I have no need for a details page, I can disable it. And then from here I can preview my results. Notice that when I preview now, you don't see any data because currently in the visits table, there is no information. That's why you're not seeing anything displayed in the results page, and that's why you're seeing no records found. And that's okay, because later on in video number 5, I'm going to walk you through all the functionality and you'll see how as the data populates, how everything will be presented. So let's close the preview screen, hit finish to save our changes, and now we have 2 data pages. Let's build our third data page for the patients to be able to view their messages. And this one's going to be more or less the same as the visits table. So we select reports, tabular format, hit next. If you guessed the messages table, you're correct. Let's give this a name. We're just going to call this view messages. I'll use the same style. And once again, we need to enable our login screen for patients. Hit next. Now going to have a search interface. Let's have record level security enabled and make sure you have patient ID to patient ID because you want them to be able to see just their own messages. You don't want a different patient to be able to see somebody else's messages. Hit next. Now going to filter, let's continue. And on the results page, what I would like to be able to see here is date sent, message itself, attachment, and which one of the doctors sent that message. Let's continue. I'm not allowing my patients to edit any data. Let's continue. Everything on the results page is okay. Let's move on. Once again, we're going to leave this as is. Continue. And I don't need a details page. And also when you preview this data page at this point, you're going to see no records found because currently John doesn't have any messages and there are currently no messages inside that messages table. Close the preview. Hit finish. And you can see how very quickly we're able to build these interfaces. That's the power of the Caspio platform. All you're doing is pointing and clicking until that finish button becomes available. And once you go through the wizard, you're going to have all of your functionality created very quickly. The last data page that I'm going to build for the patients is the ability to log in from one web page to another. The reason why I like to do this is because I like to hide the navigation menu from the portal from the login screen. And you only see the navigation menu after you have logged in. So to build this data page, once again, click on New Data Page link, select the HTML data page, hit Next. Let's call this Patient Login. I'm going to use the same style. And once again, you have to apply your patient login authentication. Hit Next. Go ahead and disable the HTML editor. And what you're going to do on this screen is just write a very simple one-line script to redirect the user from one page to another. And to do that, just have an open bracket, script, and then type out window.location equals, and in between the quotes, you're going to type visits.html. Now in my directory, where I'm hosting my web pages, I'm calling this page visits.html. You might have a completely different URL where you're going to deploy your data pages. And then once you're done, just close the script tag, and that's all you have to write. Now, you don't have to build this HTML data page if you don't want to. You can apply the login screen directly on top of the data page if you don't wish to redirect the user from one web page to another. The benefit of redirecting is the ability to hide the navigation menu from the login screen. And you will see the effect and the behavior once we deploy this in video number 5. When done, click on Finish to save your changes. And for our patients, we're done. What you can do now is just very simply close the patients folder, open up the doctors folder, and now continue building the remainder of the data pages. So what is some of the functionality we can build for the doctors? Well, let's take a look at the live example. And here you can see that I'm logged in as the doctor, and the first thing that the doctor is going to be able to see is just a very quick dashboard to let him or her know, how many patients we're getting per month, patients by status, visits by patient, and also a number of messages that we submitted to each of the patient's portals. Depending on what kind of data you're tracking, you can build different types of charts. But for the data that we have, these 4 charts make sense. So let's go into Caspio and let's quickly create all 4 of these charts. To begin, click on the New Data Page link, select Charts, and let's begin with a simple line chart and hit Next. For your data source, go ahead and select the visits table because that table contains all the visits, and since we are tracking number of visits per month, that needs to be our desired data source. Let's call this visits by month. I'm going to use the same style, and this time when you password protect this chart, you want to make sure you select the doctor login because the doctor needs to be able to log in first before they're able to see this dashboard. Continue. I don't need to build a search interface, so let's go ahead and filter data. No need for record level security at this point because the doctors are going to be able to see all the information regarding patients. Now you could build an additional tier, so if you wanted doctors just to see their own patients, so imagine if it's a big hospital and you have multiple doctors who can only see their own patients, well in that case you can build an additional layer of user roles and be able to control what you see based on record level security. For now, we're going to bypass that and continue. I'm not going to filter. Let's continue. And here's the screen where you configure the chart. I'm going to make a few modifications, so just go ahead and follow along as I make these changes inside your own account. For my title, I will simply say visits by month. If you already have this title inside your HTML template or on your website, you don't have to add the title inside this field. You can also control the width and height of your chart, so you can set it to auto if you want it to automatically resize as you shrink and expand the browser. I'm going to disable the legend, and under data source settings, you have 2 options on how you can plot the data. I'm going to select the second one where we use separate fields for each series. For my x-axis, we're going to select the data visit, and we're going to group the data based on day rollup, and we want based on month. So what that does, it takes all the data from that table and it groups it based on month because we have the date field. My y-axis is going to remain the same, and for my value, all you need to do here is select your patient ID, make sure your aggregation is set to count, and you can also set a marker if you want a different symbol to be plotted. I'm going to select square, and that's all you have to do. If you don't have any data inside your table and you hit preview, you're not going to be able to see any information plotting onto a chart. In order to view the data, obviously you need some data inside that table. I'm going to show you how we add information into a table so that we can display it on the front end. For now, all we're going to do is click on Finish to save our changes, and very quickly build the other three charts. Select Charts, and let's build our bar chart that shows top 5 patients who have come in for a visit. Once again, Visits table. Let's call this Patients by Month. I'm going to use the same style, and you want to make sure you restrict based on doctor login. Hit Next. No need for a search form, so just the same settings as before. You can give your chart a title. This time I'm going to show you an example without the actual title. We're going to plot this the same exact way. For my y-axis, we want to display the patient ID. So now if you think about the y-axis, that's where we display the patient's names. Right now it'll display the ID, but later on I'm going to show you how, using the relationship screen, we can swap out the ID with the actual name. My x-axis will be the total. And for value, once again, what you want to do is select patient ID, make sure you have it set to count, and on the following screen, select count patient ID, Z to A, and we want to display maybe the top 10 or top 5. It's up to you how many patients you want to display on that bar chart. Hit Finish to save your changes. Let's build our third chart, and this time we'll select the pie chart. We want the patients based on status, and all the patient information resides inside the patient info table. Let's give it a name, Patients by Status. Same style. Restrict access to our doctors. Click Next. No search. Hit Next. Not going to filter. And now the pie chart is very easy to configure. Give your chart a title. For your category, what are you looking to plot? In our case, that's going to be patient status. And for the value, just select the name of the patient and do a count. You can choose to display the values as either percentage, or if you want to show the actual figure, just uncheck this box. And when you're done, click on Finish. And the last chart is also once again going to be a pie chart, so let's hit New, Charts, Pie Chart, hit Next. And this one is going to be based on the Messages info table. So we'll call this Messages by Patient. Same style. Once again, restrict to our doctors. Click Next. No need for a search interface. Let's move on. And when it comes to configuring, again, it's the same exact thing as we just looked at. For your category, just select patient ID, and for your value, just do a very simple count of the patient ID. And let's not show that as percentage, even though you have that option to do so. When you're done, click on Finish. And just like that, we were able to build 4 charts very quickly within just 2 or 3 minutes. Keep in mind, if I wasn't explaining anything, I would be able to build these interfaces in literally 15 to 20 minutes. But because I'm trying to walk you through on how to set this up, it takes a little bit longer. If you try to preview one of these charts, it's going to ask you to log into the application. Notice now inside my table of doctors, if we open it, we don't have any information. So let's go ahead and add a single doctor in here. We'll say Kelly Powers, kelly@doctor.com. We'll set her password to be test. And I want Kelly to be an active doctor. And now we added Kelly to the database directly inside the table. Later on, you can build a form for yourself if you want to do this via the web. But instead of building a data page, I can directly go to my table and I can input any entry that I want inside the table. Let's go back to data pages to show you now. If I log in as doctor to view the patients by status, let's hit preview. And now I go ahead and log in as kelly@doctor.com, password test. We're able to see that pie chart. If you're wondering where this data is coming from, if you look inside a table of patients, you're going to be able to find John Doe. And at the moment, John's status is flagged as new. This is the reason why the pie chart can pull that information and display that data in real time. Let's go back to data pages, open up the doctors folder, and let's continue building the rest of the application. The 5th data page that I'm going to build for doctors is the ability for them to update their profile. So if we look at my live example, and if we navigate over to the profile link, or this web page, you will see that every doctor will have the ability to update their personal info along with their account info. So let's go back to Caspio, click on the new data page link, And under Forms, just like before, you want to select Single Record Update, hit Next. Make sure you select your doctors table as your data source because all the doctor information is inside that table. Let's give this data page a name, Update Profile. Same style, and you definitely want to restrict access to only your doctors. Hit Next. How does the doctor find their information? Well, it's through a doctor ID. In the very first dropdown, you want to make sure you select that, and the matching field in the current data source is also going to be doctor ID. Hit Next. What fields would you like the doctors to be able to update? Let's display their name. Give them the ability to update their email and password, and account status is only for admin to be able to make doctors active versus inactive. So let's continue. The name field is going to be display only. The email field, let's give them the ability to edit that. You can also repeat for confirmation, so confirm change of email. Same thing with password, and for password, it's required for them to enter in their current password to validate that before they can create a new password inside their profile. And when you're done, all you have to do is click Finish to save your changes. If you'd like to see what that update profile form looks like, just click on the preview link and you can see, because I'm still logged in as Kelly, that I'm able to update my email, and I can also update my password where I have to put in my current password before I update it to a new one. And I'm going to repeat myself one more time. You can see how quickly and easily in Caspio we can build these forms and reports. It literally takes just a minute or two to build a very simple form. And once you have the form created, later on you're going to embed that form into your website, but I will show you how to do that in video number 5. For now, let's close the preview screen and continue building the rest of the data pages. Next data page that we are going to build is the ability for doctors to be able to manage their patients. So if I go to my live example and we go to manage patients, we have this nice search interface that allows the doctor to search based on different criteria. Upon clicking search, we can view the results where we have a list of all the patients, and we can also have this details link to drill into the details of each patient. So let's learn how to build this. Let's go back to Caspio, click New Data Page, select Reports. Once again, I'm going to use the tabular format and continue. For my data source, I'm going to select my patient info table because that's where all the patients are. Let's give this a name. We're going to call this View Manage Patients. I'm going to use the same style. I definitely want to restrict access to my doctors because only doctors should have the ability to see this information. Hit Next. And now let's create a search interface. I'm going to leave the top radio button selected and continue. And then it's going to ask me what fields do you want to include in your search form. So let's select patient name. Let's have email, policy number, patient status, and also account status. You can include as many fields as you want. Even in your own projects that you're building, you'll probably have different fields depending on the nature of your application. Just keep in mind that you can include as many search fields as you want to filter data however you want. Let's continue. Now let's learn how to modify some of these search fields. Notice that by default, every single field that's selected on the left-hand side has a comparison type of equal. That means you have to know the exact name that you're searching for in order to pull up that result. If you change the comparison type from equal to contains, this works like a partial keyword search. So if you type in letter A for name and you click search, it's going to return all the names that contain letter A. And just to speed things up a little bit, I'm going to select contains for both the email, name, and also the policy number. For patient status, in my live example, I am using a dropdown. So let's learn how to do that. Instead of that being a text field, I'm going to select dropdown. For my source, I can either input my own custom values, I can look up a table, or I can do both custom and lookup table. So I'm going to choose both, and under Custom Values tab, I'm going to type out Search Any. Make sure you delete the value because you're not really looking for this. And then under Lookup Table, if you remember from video number 2, we created a table called Status Lookup. And this table contains all the statuses. For account status, notice how Caspio converts this automatically into a radio button option. So if it's a checkbox in the table, yes or no data type, and you create a search interface on that field, it automatically converts it into a radio button because a checkbox can either be yes or no. By default, I would like to have any be selected. Let's hit next. Now, what information do you want to display on the results page? Let's have the name of the patient, their phone number. Let's have the insurance carrier and policy number. Let's also have their email, status, and also account status. Let's continue. I don't want the doctors to have the ability to edit on the results page. I could if I wanted to, but I'm going to save that for the details view. Let's move on. And on the results page, what I need to do now is include, using this insert button, an HTML block. You're going to move this HTML block all the way down. You can position it anywhere you want. And now I'm going to teach you how quickly in Caspio you can create a very basic hyperlink. So when you click on that details link, it redirects the user from one web page to another web page. And the reason why you want to do that is because in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be showing you how you pass information from the database table inside the URL. This is very common in a database application. It's not proprietary to Caspio in any way. 90% of database applications on the web use this ability to pass parameters or pass values in the URL. So all I'm going to do is give my details link a name. I'm just going to call it details. I'm going to highlight this text. I'm going to click on this button called link. And I have a URL in my directory. I'm calling it patient details.html. That's the name of my URL. Now, in order to pass the value in the URL, all you need to do is add a question mark. Then you're going to give your parameter a name. I'm going to be passing the patient ID. So I'm just going to abbreviate that as PID. I'm going to add an equal sign. And all you need to do is, using this insert button, is introduce that field that you wish to pass from the patient's table. Why do we want to pass that patient ID field? Well, if later you want to link the visits to that patient, you need to stamp this patient ID from the patient's table into the visits table. And you're also going to be wanting to stamp that patient ID into the messages table so that you can relate your patients to messages and you can relate your patients to the visits. Select the field, click OK, hit OK once again, and you will now see how that link becomes clickable. If you would like to see what the actual HTML code looks like, you can click on the source button and you get to see what that hyperlink looks like in HTML. Click on the source button again, and once again we have that details link. Let's continue. Let's display 25 patients per page and move on. And this time I'm going to disable the details page, and in a couple of minutes I will explain why. But at this point you can preview your data page to see what it looks like. Click search, and if you hover over the details link and if you look in the bottom left hand corner of my screen, down here, you will see that I'm passing PID equals, and then we have a random ID that belongs to John Doe. So this means when I click on this link, it's going to take me to a page called patients_details, and in the process, it's going to pass that ID to the subsequent page. If you like the way the report looks like, just go ahead and close the preview tab, save your changes, and there's my report. Now what we want to create, if I go to my live example, click search, and if I click on this details link, take a look at my URL as I click on that details link. I'm going to click on that link, and in the process you will see how it takes me to this web page called patientdetails.html, and you can see how simultaneously I pass the ID of that patient to this page. On this page we have 4 additional data pages: the ability to view the patient details, patient visits, blood pressure readings, and we have patient messages. And each one of these 4 data pages are going to be receiving this unique ID that we pass from the results page. Why? Because in order for me to filter out the patient details, I have to receive this value that belongs to Shelly. In order for me to filter out her visits, and just the visits that belong to her, I once again have to receive this value. And same thing applies to our blood pressure readings chart and also the patient messages. The way I like to refer to the URL, I like to call it a vehicle or a vessel that's going to carry the information from the database and pass that information from one web page to another web page. So think of it like pitching and catching, or you have to throw something and you have to receive it. We initiated the throw when we clicked on the details link to pass the value. We now have to learn how to receive that value inside these data pages. So the first data page that we're going to build is this patient details. So let's go to Caspio, click on new data page. And to just view the details of that patient, click on reports, and you're going to find this data page type called details. Click next. select your patient info table, and then let's give this data page a name, patient details. I'm going to use the same style. Once again, we want to restrict access to our doctors. Click Next. On this screen, what you want to enable here is the second radio button to filter data. You want to make sure you allow parameters, and always go with bridge and external parameters because it includes both. External parameters are the ones that you passed in the URL. Let's continue. Now we want to filter our data. In order to filter just Shelly's information, we have to learn how to receive that patient ID that we passed in the URL. So what you want to do here is include patient ID field to the right, click Next, and using the Advanced tab, all you need to do here now is receive the value. Let me go back to my live example. We learned how to pass the value. We now have to learn how to receive the value. So in the data page wizard, just check this box. Inside this dropdown, select external parameters and make sure your parameter name is spelled the same exact way, PID. So if you look at my live example, my parameter name is PID. Therefore, I need to call it the same exact way. And make sure you select the top radio button, value required. The reason why the value is required, in order for you to filter out Shelly's information, something has to be passed in the URL. So this value is required. Let's go back to Caspio. From here, click Next. And now include whatever fields you want in the details view. I'm not going to spend too much time modifying the details page. I'm just going to go ahead and include all the fields. Click Next. And one final thing that I want to do here is under Section, just create 4 different columns, and I'm going to position my labels on top. So it looks just like my live example where we have 4 different columns, and you can see how my label position is on top of the data. Once again, back to Caspio. Once you're done, go ahead and click Finish to save your changes. And here's that newly created data page called Patient Details. What's going to happen now, just to give you a quick overview when looking at the data pages, once you deploy this data page on a web page, you click on the details link from this data page, and it's going to redirect you to a different web page where you have this data page deployed. And the way they're linked together is via that value that we passed, that patient ID. Just like in my live example, if I go back to Manage Patients and I click Search, notice that this results page is deployed on managepatients.html, but the moment you click on the details link, it takes you to a different web page where we see that details, and it's all linked via this value that we pass in the URL. The next thing that I want to show you how to create is when you click on this link here, we once again pass the value to another web page. So when I click on this link, it takes me to a page called editdetails.html, and in the process, we're once again passing Shelly's ID. So inside this details view, we can now edit Shelly's information, or we can also go back to the details page. For now, let's just go back, and let's learn how to do this. Very easy to do. Go back inside Caspio, edit your patient details, and just navigate to the details view. We already did all this work, so let's just go to the details page right over here. And what you can do is using this insert button, just go ahead and either add an HTML block or a header and footer. In this case, I'm going to put a header and footer. And above my details view, I'm going to create another hyperlink. Let's just call it Edit Details. I'm going to highlight this text. I'm going to click on this link button. And then once again, you have another web page in your directory where you're going to be deploying that update form. So you're able to update the details of that patient. In my directory, I call this Edit Details.html. And once again, you have to add a question mark to initiate the string. You're going to pass the patient ID once again, so we add PID =, and once again you insert the patient ID field from your table as a string, and then when you're done, click OK, and there's my clickable link. Notice how in this example it's a very basic hyperlink, whereas in my live example I'm using a very nice button. The application that you're going to download, it's going to be a completed application. You're going to see how I'm using some inline CSS to manipulate some of the elements inside that hyperlink in order to give it that effect of a button. But in this video tutorial, I'm not going to spend the time teaching you how to do that. So now let's go ahead and click on Finish to save our changes. And we're done. So here's the behavior that we have so far. Looking back into our live example, let's go back to the results page. What we're doing when we click on this details link, we're carrying over the patient ID to the subsequent page. Here's my patient ID, and now we created this additional link inside the details view to carry over the ID to another web page. So essentially what we're doing is just passing the information from one web page to another, and then we're doing the same thing again by clicking on this link to go to this page where now we have to build this form in order to update the details of that patient. So let's go to Caspio and let's learn how to build this update form. Click New Data Page. And the type of data page that I'm going to choose is under Reports. Once again, we're going to select Details, click Next. Let's use the Patient Info table. And let's give this a name. We're going to call this Edit Patient Details. Same style, and make sure you select your doctor login. Click Next. Just like the previous data page that we created, we once again want to filter our data, allow parameters, bridge and external parameters. Click Next. We want to filter out and edit the patient's details based on the patient ID that we're receiving. So same setup. And hopefully by now you know how to create this yourself. You go to the Advanced tab, you receive the value externally. Make sure you call it the same exact way, PID. Value is required. You hit Next. Include whatever fields you want to be able to edit in the Details view. For right now, I'm just going to include all of them. Click Next. And you can once again create multiple columns if you want. You can lay out this form however you want. You don't really need to include patient ID because that's not going to be an editable field, so you can just remove that from this view. But if you want to make the name editable, all you need to do is just change the form element from display only to a text field, and you can just apply the same change to whatever field you like to be able to edit. What you need to do next is very simple: insert another header and footer. And now in this header, what I would like to create is some kind of a back button to take the user back to the details view. So if you look at my live example, there's a back button here. So when I click on it, it goes back to this view. Edit details again, and once again, we see that back button. So under data pages, let's create a link called back, highlight that text. Now, if you know how to code in HTML, you can click on the source button and code that in very quickly. And if you do that, all you need to do is just type it out. I'm going to go ahead and paste my hyperlink, and you can see here, there's my backlink. In between the quotes is my destination URL, where I'm redirecting the user back to. And then once again, we have PID, and if you want to send that patient ID back to the details view, you input this syntax: open bracket, @ PID, and then you close the square bracket. Click on the source button again, and once again, we have that backlink. Now, you can also use this button here like before. It's up to you, but I wanted to show you a different method. If you just click on the source button, you can type out your HTML if you know how to type out an HTML hyperlink. One last thing that we're going to do, we're going to hit Next here. You can have the doctor be able to navigate to next previous record. So if I quickly want to navigate to another patient, you can enable that. I'm going to go ahead and disable that and hit Next one last time. Now on this screen, when you update the patient's details, what I would like to be able to do is redirect the user back to the details view. Watch what happens in my live example. If I very simply just add another Y to Shelly's name and I hit update, it goes back to the details view, and you can now see these two Ys. So if I go back to edit details and I remove one of the letters and I click update again, but every time I click update, it always redirects me back to the details view. So how do we create that? Inside Caspio, instead of seeing a display message upon submission, I want to go to a new page, and now you input your URL where when you click on update, where you want the user to go. And I want the users to go back to patient details.html. Once again, we add a question mark because we have to send the parameter back to the details view. PID =, and then you're going to once again insert the patient ID as a string. The last thing that you want to do here is keep the URL relative, so it remains inside that directory, that URL. And that's all you have to do. Now all you need to do is click Finish to save your changes, and you have that final data page. The workflow here is to manage patients, click on the Details link to view the patient details, and now when you click on the Edit link under Patient Details, it takes you to this page where you can edit those details of the patient. But on this data page, you have the back button, and you can also click Update to redirect back to the patient details. These three data pages are deployed on 3 different web pages. I'm going to walk you through one more time in my live example, just so that it sticks. So manage patients, Right now we're under Manage Patients. When I click on the details, it takes me to Patient Details, where we pass the value, and I can go to another web page, Edit Details, where we once again pass the value. But every time we click on these links, we're always passing the patient ID back and forth in order to filter out the data of that patient. Let's go back to the details. And the next thing I'm going to teach you how to build is patient visits. And just to put you at ease, if you're finding this to be a daunting task, it's really not. It just takes a little bit of practice to understand how to navigate the data page wizard. But this data page and all the links that you see here are created exactly the same way as we just learned. Now let's go to Caspio and learn how to build this one. Click on New Data Page. Go down to Reports because we want to be able to see the list of visits. So select Tabular, hit Next. Your data source should be the visits table. And let's give it a name. View Patient Visits. Once again, I'm going to use the same style. Restrict access to doctor login. Hit Next. No need for a search interface because I just want to list the visits directly underneath the details view. So let's filter data, allow parameters, bridge and external. Hit Next. You're filtering all the visits based on the patient ID that we passed from the results page. So make sure you include patient ID. In the Advanced tab, receive the value. Externally, call it the same exact way, which is PID. Value is required. Hit Next. And now what information do you want to display on the results page? Let's have data visit, reason for visit. Let's include all of numerical data. And let's also include doctor notes so he or she can see what internal notes they're inputting for each visit. Hit Next. On this report, I'm going to include inline edit and inline delete. What this enables the doctor to do, if you look at my live example, now I can come over here and do an inline edit, or I can delete this visit if I want to. That's what the two checkboxes are allowing you to do, is simply just do an inline edit or delete. Back to Caspio, hit Next. Some of the changes that you may want to make to your numerical data is under localization and formatting. Under weight, for example, you click Edit, you do Custom, you select Number, and then you can control how many digits you want to have after the decimal point. For weight, you don't really need that, so you just select 0. Temperature, you may decide to have 1 digit after the decimal, so you enable Formatting, Custom, you select Number, and then you select 1 digit after the decimal. And then pulse, systolic, and diastolic are all going to be the same. So let's go ahead and change that to a number with 0 digits, and same thing for the blood pressure. Very quickly, we just make these modifications, and one last one, and 0 digits. Click OK. And what you want to do next on this screen is just like before, you're going to insert a header and footer, and inside the header, just go ahead and type out Add New Visit as your text. You're going to highlight that text, click on the link button, and then include that URL. So when you click on that link, it takes you to that submission form where you input a new visit. In my directory, it's called addvisit.html. Again, don't forget the question mark to initiate the string, PID for patient ID, =, and then what you want to do is insert patient ID like before as a string. Click OK, and now that becomes a clickable link. Hit Next. Hit Next again and go ahead and disable the details page because we are already displaying all the information in the results page, so there's really no need for a details view. Once you're done, click Finish, and there's your data page that lists all the visits. This is basically the report that we just created, and when you look at the report, it's going to receive this value, and if this value exists in the visits table, it's going to display you all of these visits that belong to that patient. We also created this link to add a new visit, so when you click on it, you have the submission form, and this is going to be created the same exact way as in the previous data page when we created edit details of a patient. So let's go back to Caspio, click on New Data Page, and this time you want a submission form because you're adding a new visit to the database. You're no longer updating an existing visit, you're adding something new to the table. In other words, you're creating a new record inside a table, so you need to create a submission form. Hit Next, link that to your visits table. Let's call this Add New Visit. Select the same style, restrict access to doctors, hit Next. And now we want to include all the fields in our submission form because we're inputting all of this data into the form, so hit Next. For your doctor ID, this time I'm going to teach you how using the authentication method We can hide this field and automatically stamp the doctor's ID that's logged into the application. And to do that, instead of that being a text field, you want to make that field hidden. Use the authentication field and grab the doctor ID from the doctor info table. This will automatically stamp the doctor's ID into the visits table. For your patient ID, we learned this in the prior data page. In order to receive it, you go to the Advanced tab, Receive Value, Externally, and you want to call that the same exact way, which is PID. Go back to your Standard tab and very simply just hide that field because you don't want the user to accidentally tamper with that information. You want to make sure it's hidden. Data visit can be a text field with maybe a calendar pop-up. You can decide to make that field required if you wish. Reason for visit is going to be a text area, so you can type in more data. And then you have weight, temp, pulse, systolic and diastolic reading, and finally you have some internal doctor notes, which also can be a text area. Here you also want to include a header and footer and create that back button. I already have the hyperlink, so I'm just going to click on the source button and paste my link here. So now when you click on the source button again, you see that back link. And one last thing that you want to do is on the confirmation page, you want to send the user back to the new page, and just like before, we want the users to go to patient details.html $PID =, and then you insert the patient ID as a string, keep the URL relative, and when you're done, just click on finish. And that's it. So now we have this report to view the visits, and we have the ability to add a new visit if a patient comes into the office. So let's take a look at the behavior in the live example. Let's go back. We just created this report. When you add a new visit and you fill out this form, let's just say NA, we'll say weight 170, temperature can be 95 or 96, pulse can be 75, systolic reading can be, let's say, 120/80, which is the optimal blood pressure, and then for internal notes we can say she is at optimal health. So as soon as I hit submit, it should redirect me back to the details page, and it does, and you can see that latest entry now inside this report. And that's how easy it is to very quickly build these data pages, and once you learn how to navigate inside the Caspio platform, you're going to be able to build these very quickly, and at the end you just deploy them onto your website to have all of this functionality. Let's go back to Caspio. And just for the interest of time, I have already created the remainder of these data pages. You're going to find all of these when you download the application, but really quickly, here's my doctor login that redirects very much like the patient redirect. So when you log in as a doctor, it takes you to a different URL where you can see the dashboard. And just a really quick recap, if I edit this data page, you will see that on this screen, what you need to do is just write a very simple script to take the doctor to dashboard.html. So in my live example, if I log out, notice that my login screen is deployed on login.html, but as soon as I log in as the doctor, it redirects me to dashboard.html, where eventually we're going to learn how to deploy each of the charts. Let's cancel that. I also created a form to add a new message, and I have a report that shows me all the messages. And finally, I also created an additional chart that filters out the blood pressure readings by receiving that patient ID from the URL. And once you download this application and you click edit, you will be able to see how each of these data pages were created. But in total, as you can see, we ended up with 19 data pages. We have a fully functional application with some really nice workflows, and we did all of this in roughly about 60 minutes. The goal is when you get used to the Caspio platform, you should be able to build this in literally 10 to 15 minutes and be up and running with this application in no time. This concludes the video on how to build all the interfaces inside Caspio. I hope that you were able to replicate a lot of this inside your account, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video where I teach you how to take each of these data pages and how to deploy them into a website. I'll see you there.